First contact in the classroom. Professor Xylith's antennae twitched nervously as he reviewed the student roster for the upcoming term at the Galactic Academy of Cultural Studies. Among the usual array of species names, the flowing script of the Andromedans, the precise geometric patterns of the Rigelians, the musical notations of the Lyrans, one entry stood out starkly in its simplicity: Zara Chen, Earth, the first human to ever attend the Academy. The professor's outer membrane rippled with concern as he remembered the heated debates in the Academy Council. Many had opposed accepting a student from a Class 12 Deathworld, arguing it would put other students at risk. But the progressive faction had prevailed, citing the recent peace treaties and the need for greater understanding between species. As students filed into the amphitheater-style classroom on the first day, their reactions to Zara were exactly what Xylith had feared. The Andromedans' crystalline bodies darkened in alarm, the Rigelians' protective scales bristled, and the Lyrans emitted high-pitched warning harmonics. Only Zara seemed unfazed, her dark eyes taking in everything with keen interest as she chose a seat in the front row. She looked deceptively harmless in her academy uniform, but Xylith knew the truth about humans. Their endurance, their resistance to toxins, their ability to survive extreme temperatures and injuries that would kill most species, these were just the beginning. Their home planet was a nightmare of active tectonics, extreme weather, and aggressive predators. Yet somehow, humans had not just survived but thrived there. "Welcome to comparative xenobiology," Xylith began, his translator converting his bioluminescent pulses into standard galactic. "This term, we have a unique opportunity for cross-species understanding. Our final project will be a comprehensive study of each student's homeworld, with special attention to environmental challenges and evolutionary adaptations." A Rigelian student named Kasit raised a scaled appendage. "Professor, will we be required to interact directly with all classmates during this project?" The emphasis was clear, and several other students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Before Xylith could respond, Zara spoke up. Her voice was calm, but carried clearly through the room. "I understand your concern. Earth is classified as a death world for good reason. But consider this: if humans were actually as dangerous as the stories suggest, would I be sitting here right now, wearing the same uniform as you, hoping to learn and make friends?" The silence that followed was broken by an unexpected sound, the musical chime of Lyran laughter. It came from Melody of Starlight, a junior student known for her independent thinking. "The human makes a logical point," she harmonized. "Besides, I've always wondered why a species would voluntarily evolve on a planet with liquid water everywhere." "Actually," Zara smiled, "we're mostly liquid water ourselves. About 60%. The horrified gasps from her classmates were interrupted by Professor Xylith clearing his throat equivalent. "This is exactly the kind of cultural exchange we're hoping to facilitate. Now for your first assignment." As he outlined the project requirements, something interesting. While most students were still maintaining a careful distance from Zara, they were watching her with growing curiosity rather than pure fear. Melody of Starlight had even moved her hover desk slightly closer. Perhaps this experiment in interspecies education wasn't doomed after all. But as Xylith pulled up the first lecture slides about environmental adaptation, he couldn't help but wonder if the Academy was truly prepared for what they would learn about Earth and its inhabitants. The real test would come next week, when they began their unit on predator-prey relationships. Xylith had already modified the curriculum 3 times, worried that the standard examples wouldn't be sufficient for a species that had evolved alongside Earth's megafauna. How do you explain the concept of an apex predator to someone whose ancestors had not just survived them, but had eventually become one themselves? As the lecture proceeded, Zara took notes diligently, occasionally glancing at her classmates with an expression Xylith couldn't quite interpret. Was it loneliness? Amusement? Determination? The professor made a mental note to brush up on human facial expressions. He had a feeling understanding them would become very important very soon. The class ended with students breaking into small groups to begin research for their projects. While most groups formed along species lines, Melody of Starlight deliberately drifted toward Zora's desk. "I would be honored to learn more about your water world," she chimed. "Perhaps we could exchange data about our respective environments." Zora's face lit up with what Xylith now recognized as a smile. "I'd like that," she said, "though I should warn you. Some of our weather patterns might seem a bit extreme." "Extreme how?" asked Melody of Starlight. "Well," Zora began, "have you ever heard of something called a tornado?" Professor Xylith quickly adjusted his lesson plan for the following week. Something told him they were all about to learn far more than what was in the standard curriculum. Predators of the stars. A week into the term, Professor Xylith's classroom hummed with nervous energy. Today marked the beginning of student presentations about their homeworld's most dangerous predators. The Andromedans had volunteered to go first, their crystalline bodies glowing with pride as they approached the holoprojector. "Behold," announced Crystal Shard at dawn, their lead presenter, the most feared hunter of the Crystal Plains. The hologram flickered to life, revealing a creature that looked like flowing mercury given form. "The liquid death, as we call it, can squeeze through the smallest crack in our crystalline structures and dissolve an Andromedan from the inside out." The class chittered and hummed in appropriate horror, but Xylith noticed Zora's hand shoot up. "Question," she said, "how do you defend against it?" "Simple frequency harmonics," Crystal Shard replied. "We emit specific vibrations that keep them at bay. Our cities are surrounded by harmonic barriers." Zora nodded thoughtfully, making notes. Xylith wondered if she was being polite or genuinely interested. After all, what could possibly impress someone from a world where microscopic organisms could kill you simply by being ingested with food? The Regelians presented next, showcasing their world's atmospheric predators, vast floating creatures that could engulf entire floating cities if not for advanced shield technology. The Lyrans followed with their sonic hunters, beams of pure sound that could shatter molecular bonds with their hunting calls. Each presentation was met with appropriate awe and terror from the class, but Xylith noticed something curious. Zora's reactions were becoming increasingly harder to read. She looked almost wistful. Finally, it was Melody of Starlight's turn. Her presentation was about the harmonic disruptors of her homeworld, creatures that could scramble the musical patterns that made up Lyran biology. As she finished, she turned to Zora. "I've noticed you taking extensive notes. Do you find our predators particularly frightening?" Zora seemed to choose her words carefully. "Actually, I've been noting how elegantly each species has evolved defenses against their primary predators. It's fascinating how life adapts." "And what of Earth's predators?" asked Kist, the Regelian who had been so suspicious initially. "Surely they must be truly terrifying to warrant your world's classification." A strange expression crossed Zora's face. Was that amusement? "Well," she began, "Earth's predators are different. You see, we don't really have one supreme predator. We have millions of them, each adapted to their specific environment." The class fell silent. Even Professor Xylith's antennae froze in shock. "For example," Zora continued, pulling up her own holographic display, "this is what we call a great white shark." The image showed a massive creature with rows of serrated teeth. They're apex predators in our oceans, which cover most of our planet. They can smell a single drop of blood from a quarter-mile away. Before anyone could react, she switched the image. "This is a saltwater crocodile. They've remained virtually unchanged for millions of years because they're already perfect killing machines. And this, another switch, is just a regular tiger. They can swim, climb, and hunt in almost complete darkness. But how do you survive?" Crystal Shard's voice wavered. "Where are your harmonic barriers? Your shield technologies?" Zora blinked. "Oh, we don't have those. Most of our technology for dealing with predators is pretty basic. Strong fences, reinforced buildings, being careful where we go. Sometimes we just have to run." Run. The word rippled through the classroom in various translations, each version carrying its own note of disbelief. Sure, Zara shrugged. Humans are actually excellent at running. We can run longer distances than almost any other species on our planet. It's called persistence hunting. It's how we used to catch prey before we developed tools. Professor Xylith noticed the subtle shift in the classroom's atmosphere. The students weren't just afraid anymore. They were fascinated. Here was a species that had evolved not by developing special defenses or overwhelming offensive capabilities, but by becoming adaptable enough to survive anything their world threw at them. But surely, Melody of Starlight chimed in, your species eventually developed superior technologies to eliminate these threats. Zara shook her head. Actually, we're working hard to preserve many of our predator species now. They're important parts of our ecosystems. Some humans even keep smaller predators as pets. Pihitis. The universal translator struggled to convey the multiple octaves of shock in the collective response. Oh yes, Zara smiled, pulling up one final image. This is my cat, Whiskers. She's a descendant from desert hunters. Would anyone like to see more pictures? As the class erupted into a chaos of questions and exclamations, Professor Kyleth made another adjustment to his curriculum. Clearly, the standard definition of apex predator needed some serious revision when it came to humans. When the thunder rolls. Today, Professor Kyleth announced, we begin our unit on planetary environmental challenges. His antennae quivered slightly as he noticed Zora suppressing what humans called a grin. After the predator presentations, he'd learned to be wary of that expression. The Regelians went first, describing their planet's caustic rain cycles. Next, the Andromedans detailed the crystal storms that occasionally swept their world. The Lyrans explained their harmonic disruptions that could shatter entire sound cities. Each presentation was met with sympathetic murmurs and understanding nods. Then it was Zora's turn. Before I begin, she said, standing at the holoprojector, I should mention that Earth's weather patterns are diverse. She paused, choosing her words carefully. We experience multiple types of extreme weather, often simultaneously, and they vary by region. The first image appeared, a massive funnel of swirling clouds descending from the sky. This is a tornado. It's a rotating column of air that can reach speeds over 300 miles per hour. They can lift houses, cars, and even trains. The class erupted in disbelief. Melody of Starlight's musical tones became discordant with shock. Your atmosphere attacks you with rotating columns of death. Oh, this is just the beginning. Zara continued, switching images. These are hurricanes, massive storm systems that can span hundreds of miles and last for days. They'd bring destructive winds, flooding rains, and storm surges that can swallow coastal cities. Crystal shard at dawn's crystalline form clouded with confusion. But surely these are rare occurrences. We have entire seasons for them, Zara replied cheerfully. Hurricane season runs from June to November in some parts of Earth. We track them by satellite and give them names. You name your atmospheric death vortexes. Caste's scales rippled in disbelief. It makes them easier to track and warn people about, Zara explained. But hurricanes aren't even the most interesting part. Let me show you lightning. The holoprojector displayed a dark sky split by brilliant forks of electricity. During storms, massive electrical discharges occur between clouds and the ground. A single bolt can be 5 times hotter than the surface of your sun, Zora explained, her voice filled with what could only be described as enthusiasm. Professor Xylith noticed several students edge their hover desks away from her. But wait, Melody of Starlight chimed in, her tones curious rather than fearful now. How your cities survive these phenomena? We build for it, Zara said simply. Storm cellars for tornadoes, flood barriers for hurricanes, lightning rods to safely channel electrical discharges. Humans are really good at adapting to our environment. She switched to another image, a landscape covered in white. This is snow, frozen water that falls from the sky. Your water, Freezes in the air. A Rigelian student's voice cracked. Yes, and it's beautiful, Zara beamed. Children play in it. We make sports out of sliding down frozen mountains on purpose. The class stared at her in horror. But that's not all. Zara continued, seemingly oblivious to her classmates' growing distress. We also have earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, dust storms, blizzards, flash floods. She paused, noticing the professor's antennae had tied themselves in knots. Should I continue? I think, Professor Tyleth managed, we've covered enough for today. But Melody of Starlight raised her appendage. Professor, I have a question for Zara. She turned to the human. You speak of these phenomena, almost fondly. Why? Zara's expression softened. Because they're part of what makes Earth beautiful. Yes, our world can be dangerous, but it's also incredible. These forces shaped us, challenged us to become stronger, smarter, more adaptable. We learned to predict them, respect them, and sometimes even harness their power. Every challenge Earth threw at us, we found a way to not just survive, but thrive. A thoughtful silence fell over the classroom. Professor Tyleth noticed something remarkable. The fear that had permeated the room during Zara's presentation was being replaced by something else. Curiosity, respect, maybe even a touch of awe. Besides, Zara added with another grin, wait until you hear about our extremophile organisms, life forms that live in volcanic vents, Arctic ice, and acid lakes. Perhaps, Professor Tyleth quickly interjected, we should save that for another day. As the class ended, he noticed Melody of Starlight and several other students clustering around Zora's desk, asking questions about snow sports and something called storm chasing. Even Kisset had drifted closer, scales no longer bristling in fear. Tyleth made a final note in his teaching block. Perhaps what makes humans truly remarkable isn't their survival of Earth's challenges, but their ability to find joy and beauty in them. Further research needed. The Apex Paradox. The Academy's Xenobiology lab was unusually crowded for an after-hours session. Professor Tyleth had initially been concerned when Melody of Starlight proposed an additional study group, but now he watched with growing interest as students from various species huddled around Zora's workstation. So you're saying, Crystal Shard at Dawn's voice sparkled with curiosity, that humans can repair broken bones naturally, without medical intervention? Well, we usually set the bone to make sure it heals properly, Zora explained, pulling up a holographic skeleton. But yes, our bodies can knit bones back together. We can even regrow liver tissue and skin. Fascinating, Kist murmured, their scales now lying flat in a sign of comfort. But surely such regenerative abilities came at the cost of other advantages. Zara shook her head. Actually, humans are kind of weird that way. We're not the strongest, fastest, or most naturally armed species on Earth. But we're good at, well, everything. We can swim, climb, run long distances, throw with incredible accuracy, and our brains can process complex spatial relationships instantly. But that makes no evolutionary sense, Professor Tyleth found himself saying. Species typically specialize to fill specific niches. To be adaptable at everything would require constant environmental pressure selecting for adaptability itself. Melody of Starlight finished, her tones thoughtful. A world that never stopped challenging its inhabitants. A silence fell over the lab as the implication sank in. It was broken by an unexpected question from a usually quiet Andromedan student. Zara. They chimed softly. Are you afraid of anything? The human's laugh echoed through the lab. Oh, we're afraid of lots of things. Fear is actually one of our biggest advantages. It makes us careful, helps us prepare, drives us to innovate. But, she paused, considering. We're also really good at being afraid and doing things anyway. Explain, Kiss demanded, leaning forward. Well, take space travel. Our first ventures into space were incredibly dangerous. We knew the risks: vacuum exposure, radiation, equipment failure. But we wanted to explore so badly that we built rockets out of what was basically controlled explosions and rode them into orbit. You deliberately sat on explosives to reach space. Professor Xylith's antennae twisted in disbelief. The early versions had about a 50-50 chance of survival, Zora confirmed cheerfully. But we kept improving them. That's another human thing. We see something dangerous and think, how can we make this safer? Or how can we use this? Like your domesticated predators. Melody of Starlight chimed in. Exactly. Take dogs, for instance. We saw wolves, pack hunters with incredible senses, and thought, hey, they could help us hunt better if we made friends with them. So we did. You made friends with pack hunters. Crystal Shard's form clouded with confusion. We've made friends with lots of species: horses for transportation, birds for messaging, even bacteria for food production. Earth's dangers taught us something important. Anything can be an ally if you understand it well enough. Professor Xylith watched as his students processed this information. He could almost see the moment when understanding dawned. Humans weren't just survivors of a death world. They were its children. Every challenge that should have killed them had instead been turned into an advantage. There's something else you should know, Zora added, her voice growing serious. All those adaptations and abilities we've been discussing, they're not even our greatest strength. What could be more significant than your physical adaptability? Kist asked. Our ability to share knowledge, Zora replied. Humans can learn from each other's experiences, pass down information through generations, and combine ideas to create new solutions. One human might be clever, but humanity as a whole, we're unstoppable when we work together. Is that why you came to the Academy? Melody of Starlight asked. To share knowledge. Partly, Zara smiled, but mostly because humans have another trait. We're endlessly curious about everything. Even things that scare us, especially things that scare us. Professor Xylith suddenly understood why the Academy Council's concerns had been misplaced. They had worried about having a death world species among their students, but they had failed to realize that humanity's true power wasn't in their physical capabilities or their survival instincts. It was in their ability to turn every challenge into an opportunity for growth, every fear into a chance for understanding, and every difference into a possibility for connection. As he watched his students eagerly sharing stories and comparing notes, Xylith realized that perhaps humans weren't just survivors of a death world. They were teachers of how to thrive in a universe full of challenges, and that lesson was worth any risk. Breaking barriers. The end-of-term exhibition at the Galactic Academy drew unprecedented crowds. News of the first human student had spread beyond the campus, and visitors from across the galaxy filled the Grand Hall, curious to see the results of this controversial educational experiment. At the center of attention was a collaborative display created by Zora, Melody of Starlight, Crystal Shard at Dawn, and Kist. Their project, titled Survival Through Understanding, had evolved far beyond the original assignment's scope. What we discovered, Melody of Starlight explained to the gathered audience, her musical tones resonating with confidence, is that the term death world is fundamentally flawed. Every world presents challenges to its inhabitants. What matters is not the dangers themselves, but how life adapts to meet them. The holographic display shifted, showing a split screen of various planetary phenomena. A crystal storm on the Andromedan homeworld paralleled an Earth hurricane. A Rigelian atmospheric predator's hunting pattern matched the formation of a terrestrial tornado. The true revelation, Crystal Shard at Dawn continued, their crystalline form gleaming with excitement, was that humans didn't just adapt to their world's challenges, they learned to understand them. Where we developed technological barriers, they developed knowledge. Where we evolved specific defenses, they evolved adaptability itself. Professor Xylith watched from the sidelines, his antennae quivering with pride. The change in his students over the term had been remarkable. Fear had given way to curiosity, then to understanding, and finally to genuine friendship. Kist, whose scales now remained perfectly smooth in Zora's presence, stepped forward. We assumed that a species from a death world would be hardened, aggressive, focused only on survival. Instead, we found that humans possess an extraordinary capacity for empathy. They don't just survive. They help others survive. They don't just adapt. They teach adaptation. The presentation shifted to show footage from their term together. Zora teaching Melody of Starlight about Earth's musical traditions, comparing them to Lyran harmonics. Crystal Shard learning human dance movements, their crystalline form catching light in beautiful patterns. Kist and Zora conducting experiments on environmental adaptation techniques that could benefit both their species. But perhaps most surprisingly, Zora added, stepping forward, we discovered that every species has something to teach about survival. The Andromedans' understanding of crystalline harmonics helped us develop new theories about Earth's plate tectonics. The Rigelians' atmospheric adaptation studies gave us insights into weather pattern prediction. The Lyran's sound-based technology suggested new ways to monitor seismic activity. A senior Academy Council member raised an appendage. Are you suggesting that the very characteristics that made us hesitate to admit Earth students are actually beneficial to galactic society? More than that, Melody of Starlight chimed in. We're suggesting that the concept of isolation based on planetary classification is counterproductive. Every world has its challenges, and every species has developed unique solutions. By sharing our knowledge, we all become stronger. The hall erupted in discussion, various species chattering, humming, and resonating in their native forms of communication. Professor Kyleth noticed something remarkable. The different species were mixing freely, the usual social barriers forgotten in their excitement to share ideas. Near the presentation area, a young Andromedan child had approached Zora with what appeared to be a toy version of Earth's sun. Is it true, they chimed shyly, that humans can look at bright lights without their crystals cracking? We have special cells in our eyes that adapt to light levels, Zora explained, kneeling down to the child's level. Would you like to learn how they work? The child's crystalline form sparkled with joy, and soon a small crowd of young aliens had gathered around, each eager to learn about the strange and wonderful adaptations of Earth life. Professor Kyleth made his final note in the term records. Project outcome exceeded all expectations. Recommendation: immediate expansion of the interspecies education program, with special emphasis on Earth student integration. Note: consider adding new course, Adaptive Psychology, Learning from Deathworld Innovation. As the exhibition continued, Zora and her friends answered questions, shared stories, and built bridges between worlds that had once seemed impossibly different. The fear that had initially greeted Earth's first student had transformed into something far more powerful, hope for a future where different species could learn from each other's challenges and triumphs. In the end, it turned out that the most important lesson from Earth wasn't about survival at all. It was about the power of curiosity to overcome fear, of knowledge to bridge differences, and of friendship to transform understanding into growth. As the evening drew to a close, Melody of Starlight turned to Zora. You know, she chimed softly, I think I'd finally understand why humans look up at the stars with such longing. You don't see danger, you see possibility. Zora smiled. That's the thing about coming from a death world, she replied. You learn that the most challenging places often hold the most beautiful discoveries.